Alright, my reviews of these games are long overdue. So first, a little backstory on how I got into these games in the first place. It all started in April of 2016. News had just hit that Alicia Vikander was cast as Lara Croft in the new Tomb Raider movie. When I heard that news, I said to myself, okay, you know what? For once in my life, I'm going to jump the curb and actually play the game before I see its movie adaptation, because that never happens with me. So many times I've seen movies that are based on something that I've never read or played or whatever. So for Tomb Raider, I decided to break that mold, and I played the 2013 game. As for what I thought of the movie, well, you can check out my videos on it if you want. But now, some years later, it was recently announced that there's gonna be an anime set in this new Tomb Raider video game timeline that's coming to Netflix, which, alright, that's kinda random. But hey, you know what? I'm down since this video game trilogy is awesome. So here we go. Let's finally talk about this Tomb Raider Survivor trilogy. Tomb Raider. So Tomb Raider came out in 2013, and it was a realistic reboot of the Tomb Raider video game franchise. You know, Lara Croft. I'll be honest, before I ever played this game, I knew next to nothing about Tomb Raider. And I still know next to nothing about Tomb Raider before this game came out. What do I know? I know that the graphics were not nearly as good. I know that there were a couple of movies based off those older games starring Angelina Jolie, and I know that her signature weapons were those dual pistols. That's what I know about Tomb Raider before this game. They were cheesy, fun action adventures dealing with archaeology and ancient mysteries and cool stuff like that, like Indiana Jones, you know. But in 2013, the franchise got a reboot that really got into the dark and gritty. This game is rated M for mature, the first Tomb Raider game ever to get that rating, and after playing it, you'll definitely see why it got that rating, cause holy shit. So this game explains the origins of how Lara Croft became the Tomb Raider. I guess in the franchise leading up to this, we never had a real origin story. So now this game gives us one. Lara Croft is part of this crew on this ship called the Endurance. They're off to find the lost island of Yamatai, home to the Sun Queen Himiko, an ancient Japanese myth. They end up shipwrecking on this island, the crew ends up scattered, and now Lara Croft has to survive on her own. She's a castaway. That's really the basic premise of the game. I mean, of course, the plot thickens from there. I'm not gonna spoil what happens, like, at the end of the game or anything, but we find out that there's this cult on the island called the Solari. They're these maniacs who worship the Sun Queen Himiko. They're led by Father Matthias, who's a pretty bad dude. Lara Croft runs into these guys, and so she has to take quite a few lives. By the end of this game, Lara Croft is a stone cold killer, and it's awesome. It's so much fun to play. But before I get into the gameplay, I gotta give all sorts of props to the characters, because the crew of the Endurance, they really feel like real people. The way they kind of jab at each other. You have Sam Nishimura, who's Lara Croft's best friend in this game, and she actually plays a really big role in this story, because she believes that she's actually a descendant of Himiko. That does play into the story later on. I'm not gonna spoil how, but it does. But the rest of the crew is really fun too. You know, you have Grimm and Roth, Reyes, Jonah, Dr. James Whitman, who's a total scumbag. I don't know, just after playing this game quite a few times over the past 5 years almost, I've grown to really become attached to these characters. The bummer is this kind of reminds you of Alien in the fact that a lot of people in this crew are somewhat expendable. Yeah, quite a few members of this crew end up dying throughout the course of the game. So my advice, if you haven't played this game yet and you plan on it, is don't get too attached like I did, because it sucks when some of these people die. Just saying. I mean, when I first played the game, I wasn't that attached, so when people die, I was like, oh, that sucks, you know, but I'm not crying or anything. But you know, after you play the game a few times, you get to really know the characters, and eventually you're like, ah, damn it, that fucking sucks that that person died. Or at least that's my experience anyway. Because these characters feel really real. You gotta give all sorts of props to the writers. But of course, where this game really shines, well, it's in a couple of areas, really. First of all is the gameplay. In fact, that's the reason I've played this game so many times in the past 5 years, is because I love playing this game. It's a third-person action game. You go around as Lara Croft. You're traversing the environment. This island is full of scraggy cliffs and mountains and slopes. The only real bummer I have about getting around is that when you're climbing a wall, it's kind of slow. Like, it feels like you're really taking your time to climb this wall with that pickaxe. Also, when you have a rope and you're climbing across it, before you get the rope ascender and you can just zip right up, but you don't get that until way into the game, so before you get that, you have to climb up this rope, and that's also kind of slow. So like in those slow moments, you're like, alright, can we get there already so we can move on with the game? But really, those are the only gripes I have about the gameplay, and they're really slight nitpicks too. Other than that, going around the island and exploring is really fun. But really what I love about the gameplay is the weapons. Taking out bad guys is a blast in Tomb Raider. And I know that before this game came out, her signature weapons were those dual pistols. But in this reboot, those are not her signature weapons. She gets them at one point, which is a really cool bit of fan service service, sure. But really, her signature weapon in this new trilogy is the bow and arrow. And I love using this bow and arrow to take out bad guys. Cause you know, you're ducking behind corners and then you peek out, shoot guys with the bow and arrow. Getting headshots is just the best because you see these bad guys going like, ah, I got an arrow in my face. Whenever I get headshots in this game, I always say like out loud, I'm always like, headshot. Headshot! Of course, the best part is when you get fire arrows later on. Because when you get headshots with fire arrows, you just see these bad guys burn in horror and they're yelling for their lives. It's so gratifying, dude. You just see them burning to a crisp. They're like, ah! Never fails to put a smile on my face. But you do get other weapons in this game too. You get 3 other guns. You get a single pistol, a shotgun, and a rifle. And I do like using the rifle because I love my rapid fire. The rifle's always been like my second choice of weapon. If I don't want to use the bow and arrow, I'll use the rifle. Because, you know, just... it's really good at killing dudes. I don't know, just for me, taking out bad guys in this game adds so much replay value. You know, that's why I've played this game so many times over the past almost 5 years. That plus the fact that Lara Croft is just extremely hot. Which I know that's something she's always been known for being since the 90s, is that yeah, she's a hot adventurer chick. But I'm just saying, at quite a few points throughout the game, you just look at Lara Croft and you're like, damn, she is just hot. That's just undeniable for me. But Lara Croft being hot is not the point of her in this game. The point of Lara Croft in this game is that she's a straight up badass. So you gotta give props to Camilla Luddington, who voiced and did the motion capture for her in this game. And this whole trilogy. Cause she did an awesome job, seriously. And speaking of things that look great, this whole game, I mean, the graphics are pretty good for 2013. The action scenes in this game are just beautiful to look at. And it gets really cinematic. That's one of the other great things about this game that gives it replay value. Is that some of these big action scenes, I mean, Lara Croft is running and shit is just happening behind her. She's running from like a plane that's crashing, or she's like about to fall into lava and someone has to grab her by the hand. It's so cinematic, you're like, you want to see this in a movie. That's why they made a movie out of it, I imagine. A lot of these big scenes, they really stick with you. When she's ziplining down, you get these wide shots of the island. It's so great to look at. And the violence. Like I said, this is the first Tomb Raider game to be rated M for mature, and it totally is, because this game gets violent as fuck. When Lara Croft is like stabbing guys in the neck with the pickaxe, you just see blood squirting out. It's awesome. There are F-bombs dropped throughout the game, but I mean, really, Lara Croft goes through the ringer in Tomb Raider. By the end of the game, she's all bloody and bruised up. You feel really bad for her because, I mean, when she first gets shipwrecked, this is like her very first adventure, you know? Before the events of this game, she had never taken a life. The events of this game really affect her. That's another big great thing about this game, is that you really see the emotional turmoil that Lara Croft goes through, and you feel it. It's really good at that. Again, you feel really bad for her. She gets raked through so much shit. Like, at a point in the game, she is in a river of blood, and you have to go through this river of blood. You're just like, ugh, that's gross. There are bones and meaty human flesh parts everywhere. It's really graphic for sure. And don't even get me started on the deaths. There are so many brutal ways you can die in this game. I mean, getting shot up and falling off of cliffs, that's nothing. There are points in this game where you can get impaled. Of course, the one that sticks with you and sticks with everyone who ever played this game, you know what I'm about to talk about, is when you're going down this river and you're trying to avoid obstacles, but if you hit one of these obstacles, boom, you get impaled through the head. An image like that never leaves your mind. It now lives up there, rent-free, forever. It's just among the most brutal things I've ever seen in a video game. Because you're just like, oh, I'm so sorry, Laura. I didn't mean to do that to you. As for the extras in this game, you know, this is one of those games where it's a big map and you can find little trinkets around the island. When you're done with the main story, you can just go around the island and look for these things. And a lot of it is actually pretty interesting. Again, it's one of those things where, like, I fell asleep in my history classes in high school because I never presented history in an interesting way like this game does. Because you can find little relics that tell you the history of this island, people who crashed onto this island in the past, Japanese relics that you'll find, and Lara will tell you all about them because she's an archaeological genius. You'll also find documents, you know, journal entries that people write. Some of them are from the crew of the Endurance, others are from the Solari. And those also actually help provide some depth into these characters in really cool and interesting ways. It's really interesting, or at least I think so. And the music in this game. Funny thing, when I was first playing this game, I never really thought much of the score. I thought it was kind of generic and kind of boring. But now, you know, almost 5 years later, I'm like, nah, this score is really good. The main theme of this new Tomb Raider trilogy is great. Da, 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 da. It's a really good theme for Lara Croft, and I'm glad they actually carried it over to the other games of the trilogy. So in the end, Tomb Raider is an awesome game. It's actually my favorite of this new trilogy, or at least it's the one I've played the most. In fact, after my very first playthrough of this game, I liked it so much that I beat it 100%. Yeah, I went around and I found all the extras, the relics, and the documents. I played all the tombs, which the tombs are like this extra side thing. They're these puzzles. You solve these puzzles and you find a little treasure at the end. But that's another cool thing about this game, is that it's also got a puzzle element. I actually didn't see that coming when I first played it. I was like, oh, there's puzzles in this game. You have to find out how to advance to the next area, like cranking levers and jumping across stuff. It's really cool. It's really engaging. And the tombs are like the hardest among those. And they actually remind you, you're like, oh yeah, well, she is the Tomb Raider. Might as well raid some tombs while we're on this island. And it's fun as hell. Whenever I want to play this game again, I always start a new file because I can't get rid of that 100% completed file. Are you kidding me? So I still have that there. Tomb Raider is super fun. It's violent as hell. The characters are great. They're fleshed out. It's a cinematic game. It looks beautiful. The music is really good. Just again, the only little gripes I have about it is that sometimes when you're climbing the wall, it's kind of slow. And when you're climbing upwards on the rope before you get the rope ascender, it's also kind of slow. But that's it. Those are the only gripes I have about this game. Other than that, Tomb Raider is solid adventure fun. So Tomb Raider, the 2013 reboot game. Have you played it? What do you think about it? Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe.